Thank you. I'm excited. This is my first presentation for Every Dog
Woo!
Austin. I'm very excited. Yeah, we're going to be talking about crate training today. A little bit of background on me. I'm a certified professional dog trainer. I am also KPA certified, which is a nice little club to be in. And I've been working in the shelter environment since 2017. I started out doing adoptions and front desk and moved into behavior pretty quickly. So I've worked in behavior departments at shelters and recently moved into more private training. So my favorite dogs to work with are dogs that are, struggling with some reactivity or confidence building, because I really just find a lot of joy helping those dogs be successful. I live in Virginia. I live in Arlington with my dog and my cat and my husband. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of my dog in this one. So Mabel will be present in a lot. So let me just share my screen and we'll get going. Okay. All right. Crate training, something that we all hear about all the time. And I think sometimes it's made to sound like quite simple, but it can be really complicated. And we want to make sure that when we're training to the crate, we're doing so in a way that's promoting positive associations and interactions with the crate. So to crate or not to crate, that is the question. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat box and we'll get to all of those at the end. So we'll start with very basics. Why do we use crates? House training purposes, right? You bring home a new puppy or your new adopted dog, and we don't know their house training history, or we know they're not house trained, and it can really help prevent them from going to the bathroom all over the house, right? And kind of building that habit while we're getting them used to going outside. It can prevent chewing or getting into inappropriate objects, things that might be harmful to your dog, counter surfing, all of those fun things, especially as we bring a new dog into our family and they kind of adjust and kind of learn the boundaries, and we kind of help them learn what we want from them in the home. It can be a really nice space for uninterrupted sleep, especially for puppies who need a lot of nap time, just like an infant. So it can kind of be akin to like when you put a baby down for a nap and you kind of close the blinds and you create a nice little dark, safe atmosphere for them to go to sleep. If you have guests over, if there are children over or children in the house, other animals, it does provide a nice safe space to have a break from those things, especially if you have visitors and your dog might be a little nervous about that. Sometimes having a crate or a space for them to go to can be really helpful in helping them relax during those times. And also to manage resource guarding behavior is a big one that we see for crate use. So if you have a dog who is a little protective over their food bowl or their chews, maybe from other dogs in the home or even from people, the crate can be a safe place for those animals to have those objects without us having to worry about walking too close and all of that. So it gives them a lot of space and boundaries around food. I also like to think of crating as a life skill. So all of those things are great. That's why we tend to go towards crate training, right? But if we're thinking about skills we want our dogs to have, to be healthy, well-adapted individuals, crating is a really big one. So we might need to crate our dog when we're traveling. It's safest to crate our dog in the car, right? It's also, if we're moving and flying overseas or flying, long distances, your dog will need to be crated for those things. So we want to start early. So if anything comes up like that, our dog already has a good association with the crate. Medical care is a big one as well. So if your dog has an injury or heartworm treatment, things like that require crate rest in a lot of cases. So, if you're starting off with a dog that's never been crated before and suddenly you have to have them on crate rest, it can be very stressful during the healing process. Boarding is a big one. Having your dog used to the crate for boarding can be helpful. We talked about visitors, especially for some of our dogs who might not be too fond of visitors. They might be a little scary, or big parties. It can be really nice to have that option of the crate in a separate safe space. And emergency situations, we never know when we might need to use a crate, if we have to evacuate, if we have to evacuate our house, or, you know, we have an emergency where we just need to put our dog away, they're injured, taking them to the vet, that kind of thing can all be useful for crate skills. When we're choosing our crate, it's going to depend on a few things. When we look at size, we're going to want to have enough space to stand up and fully turn around. And I also like to add in room to sleep comfortably. So watch your dog. If you have a larger breed dog that likes to really spread when they sleep, I would make sure that the crate can accommodate as much as we can that room to sleep comfortably, because that's an important part of making it cozy. And for puppies, they often have divider panels for the crate. So you can start with a large crate, have a divider in, and slowly make it bigger as they grow. But if you do have a puppy that's growing, make sure that you're kind of always paying attention to maybe the crate's getting a little small, maybe we need to upgrade. And then material. So you can see the three main types of crates in this presentation. So we're going to see a wire crate with this lovely golden. We have the airline crates, which are plastic, hard plastic, and then a nice little soft crate made of fabric. So it's going to depend on your dog, right? Some dogs prefer certain crates over others. For example, my dog is nervous around things that kind of flap and make a lot of noise or shift. I bought a beautiful, lovely fabric crate. I was like, we're going to take this when we go to workshops and when we train. She really didn't like it. So I kind of took her lead and I was like, okay, let's switch to the wire crate. And she was much happier there. So it means I love a 25-pound crate around with me when we go places, but it is more comfortable for her. And I didn't really want to spend time trying to work through that discomfort when I knew she'd be happy in a wire crate. Some dogs do like the security of like the airline crates. It can be more safe for them. And others like the wire crates because they can see more of what's going on around them. So it really depends on your dog. For the most part, it's also going to depend on use. What do you want your crate for? You know, to travel and bring your dog places, if you do agility or training courses, a soft crate's really helpful because they fold super easy, they're lightweight, they're really easy to bring places. But if you have a puppy, putting them in a soft crate might not be the best thing because they could easily chew through it. Wire crates are typically what we see in the house for a lot of people. Again, because the dog can kind of see what's going on around them. They do fold up more easily for storage, but they are a little bit more durable and heavier than your soft crate. And then the airline crate, this hard crate right here with the little husky looking dog, those are mostly for travel. So you'll see dogs transported from shelters and rescues to other places, and these airline travel will require this type of crate. And some people will use them in the house, but they are not as flexible. You can't just fold them up. You have to like unscrew them to take them apart. So they are a little bit more permanent in your house, not as easy to put away. So we want to make our crate cozy. So this is my dog, Mabel. Get ready to see a lot of her. We want to use a soft bedding or a crate pad. Sometimes for puppies or newly adopted dogs, they might shred beds, which is okay. We don't want them to be ingesting and shredding fabric or material. But if you find that your dog is like really into chewing up the dog bed, which sometimes they are because they're plushier, you can use like old towels or blankets for now. It's pretty rare that I would recommend a dog not having any kind of blanket in their crate unless they're like ingesting and it's a danger to them to have it in there. We want to have access to water, which I know sometimes feels counterintuitive for people who are like, but I'm using it for crate training. But if you're going to be gone for long periods of times, your dog does need to have access to water. So we can talk a little bit more about length of time in the crate and all of that as well. Location is really important as well. Dogs are really social, so they want to be by us, right? So one thing that we can do to kind of help with crate training is keep the crate in a place where more of the activity is going on. If you're crating your dog at night, crating them in the bedroom with you can be helpful. If you're out during the day and you want to practice some crate training or puppy nap time in the crate, putting that crate kind of out in the living room with you might be more helpful as well. I like to make sure that the crate's in a comfortable area of the home temperature wise. So we don't want to leave them like out in the sun, right? Or where it's really cold if you're crating your dog like in the basement, right? That might not be super comfortable. We want to add lots of enrichment items, so we can talk a little bit about that and making the crate kind of a fun place to be. Sorry, my dog is barking. I'm gonna get her a treat. Okay. And music and TV, like background noise, a white noise machine can be really helpful as well. Just as kind of setting this tone of like, this is a relaxing place for you. It filters out other noises. So if they are going to try to take a nap, it can kind of help without having some distractions, right? A crate cover or like a blanket over a crate can be helpful for some dogs. And then I always say, take off your dog's collar and their harness when they go in the crate. We never want to have an accident where our dog's collars or harnesses snag on the crate, because they can get injured during that. The big question that I often hear is, how long should I crate my dog for? And I'm gonna be annoying and say it depends. So one factor is age, right? Puppies are just not capable of holding their bladders for very long periods of time. So the rule of thumb that I like to go by for puppies is their age in months, in hours. So if you have a 2-month-old puppy, 2 hours in the crate. Some people will say their age in months +1. I kind of like to err more on less, just because, again, we're really trying to make sure that they don't have to have an accident in the crate. We're trying to establish this as a safe place. So I think it's fair to say, you know, a 3-month-old puppy, we can expect to hold their bladder for maybe 3 hours. But maybe you have a very small puppy, right? So we might need to adjust that based on your dog. Adult dogs, I personally say at most 6 to 8 hours. And if you're crating your dog for about 6 or more hours a day regularly, they do need to have some kind of substantial break between the period. So we're going to look at maybe having a dog walker come in, maybe a family member stops by and takes your dog out for a potty break, but also gives them some attention, maybe plays with them a little bit and leaves them with an enrichment item when they go. Senior dogs as well sometimes need to go out to the bathroom more. Crates might not be as comfortable for senior dogs if they're having some joint pain or more slow moving. So we could, you know, help that by getting a much cushier, supportive bed for them and giving them more breaks from the crate. Another factor is going to be your dog's size. So we kind of talked about that. If you have a Chihuahua versus my dog, she's about 85 pounds, my dog can hold her bladder much longer than a Chihuahua. It's much bigger. So small dogs do need to go to the bathroom more. They need more access to outside. House training experience also makes a difference. So an adult dog who's fully house trained can hold their bladder longer and has experience holding their bladder versus a puppy who's still learning. And your individual dog's needs are totally going to vary based on all of these things, but also on personality, crate experience that they've had before, and some other factors that might be going on in the house. And as dogs mature and start to adjust to their home, so puppies grow up, our rescue dogs start to settle in, we often find that we can crate a lot less, or in certain circumstances, or maybe we don't need to crate at all anymore. We'll talk a little bit about overcrating because I think it's important to touch upon, you know, the overcrating a dog does have effects on their physical and behavioral responses. So physical issues, especially in puppies and adolescent dogs, because they're still growing and they need chances to move freely and move those muscles in order to grow and develop appropriately. I've seen puppies from neglect cases that have been raised in a crate practically, adolescent dogs that have poor posture and they're kind of hunched because they were raised in a crate the majority of the time. Behavioral challenges from lack of enrichment and exercise. So you might notice that your dog is like jumping on gas so much, counter surfing, you know, getting into everything, a lot of pent up energy, right, from being crated too long. Kind of goes along with boredom and frustration behaviors. You can start to see a dog really be averse to the crate. They really don't like the crate. They don't want to go in, and they'll start, oh, he used to go in fine, but now I really have to drag him in, right? Depression, right? It can be depressing to just be kind of laying in the same spot for a long period of time with not a lot going on, especially for a highly social animal like a dog. Aggression, biting, growling around the crate or otherwise. Soiling the crate. is a big red flag, because dogs really shouldn't want to soil that space, because it is a small space for a reason, right? Dogs don't want to soil that. So we do sometimes see that with dogs from puppy mill situations where they've been forced to be in a crate, so they have had to get used to going to the bathroom in the crate. But for your average dog, we should never see soiling in the crate. Fear and distress while crated, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then injury trying to escape the crate, or like chewing on their paws till they bleed, that kind of thing, or like digging at the crate so much that their nails break down. So things to consider when we're using our crate is that in most times crate is a management tool that we use temporarily, or we start to phase it out and only use it for certain occasions, like, oh, well, my dog just sleeps in the crate, or really if we're only gone for this amount of time, or when we have company come over. So it can be a skill that our dogs learn early on, and then we might have to every once in a while break the crate out and be like, just remember we love the crate, right? But it's something that typically most people don't use long term. So it's really common at like 2 years old to say, yeah, after about 2 years old, we stopped using the crate because they didn't really need the management anymore. And just because your dog can physically hold their bladder for a certain period of time doesn't mean that they should. So yes, I know that my dog can hold her bladder for longer than 8 hours because during very scary windstorms, she's not gone outside. She does not want to go out. So I know she can, but is it fair for me to ask her to do that on the regular, right? So if you're crating your dog for 10-hour work days, that's a really long time to not have a bathroom break. And I can't imagine having that restriction on me. If your dog is, again, we talked about this, routinely being crated for 6+ hours at a time, I would consider an alternative to crating, which we'll talk about, or again, having somebody come in and give your dog a break during the day and some nice socialization as well. So let's talk a little bit about how we start training to the crate. So the first thing we want to do doesn't really involve crate training, but we do want to have a reward marker. So this is something like a clicker, or you'll hear trainers use the word yes to indicate that the dog has done something that we love and they're going to get reinforcer for it, usually food. So in this case, we're using a lot of food. It's a high value reinforcer for a lot of dogs, and it's really easy to use. So when we use a clicker, a verbal marker, if your dog is hard of hearing or deaf, you can use a thumbs up sign, or some people use like a flashlight as a marker, right? So basically when I click or say yes to my dog, it means you are getting a treat. It's a contract between us, and I don't want to break that contract because then the click or the mark loses its significance. It helps us to communicate more clearly and teach new skills faster because we're able to say to our dogs, that's exactly what I love. Why don't you do it again, right? So this is just an example of me using a marker with my dog. A little background where I was shaping her to push a yoga mat with her nose and roll it out. So this is kind of the beginning, and I'm marking her for the behavior of actually moving the yoga mat. So you're going to hear me click and see me treat. So this is what it looks like in action. And I apologize if this is loud. I tried to adjust the volume, but I know sometimes it doesn't always work as well over Zoom. So anytime she does the behavior of moving the mat, at first just a little bit, then she completely rolls it out. I click and then I feed. So it's a nice, simple click, then the food comes out. So the clicker or the verbal mark, yes, or good, or thumbs up, equals food is on its way, right? And before we start crate training, what we want to make sure we do is meet our dog's needs. And this is physical exercise, mental enrichment, and social needs. So if we just shove our puppy in a crate before meeting any of these needs, they're gonna cry, they're gonna be upset because they haven't had everything that they need for the day, right? So making sure that we maybe do some fetch or flirt pull, we go on a nice walk, doing some sniffing games or some enrichment items or trick training, and then of course being with us, because dogs really want to be with us. So making sure we really carve out time to meet these needs before we put our dogs in their crate, because otherwise it's going to be really hard for them to cope. We want them to be tired and fulfilled and ready to take a nap when we put them in their crate. We want to start to create positive associations right off the bat. So the way I like to do this is I will toss treats near and then toss treats away. I really like doing this exercise to start because it also gives me an idea of where my dog is with the crate. So we're kind of assuming for this training that the dog that we're working with is neutral about the crate. They don't have any real feelings either way. Or maybe they've been crated a little bit and it's been okay, but they're kind of still, we need to refresh them a little bit. So dogs that panic in the crate are very different, and we'll talk about that at the end. So I like to toss treats near because then I watch my dog's body language and I say, okay, well, I toss treats kind of right by the door and you walked right over confidently. But when I toss some treats kind of just right inside the door, I suddenly see like a neck straining. We see dogs with their tippy toes like out of the crate or like barely going in because they want the treat, but they don't actually want to go inside. So we'll talk a little bit more about the body language to look for when we're crate training, but this gives me a really nice kind of, let me see where you're at with the crate. Are you going right in for those treats? Because then it means we can start at a different place. So this is similar for people will say feed meals near or in the crate, which is great. But if you have a dog that is really like trying to get to the bowl without actually putting their body in the crate, it means that we've pushed them a little too far and we want to move the bowl to outside the crate and slowly watch their body language as we get it closer. Leave the crate door open and sprinkle goodies in there every so often so that like your dog walks by the crate and they're like, oh my gosh, every time I walk by here, there's like all this really yummy snacks or like a toy. This can sometimes not work if you have a multi-dog household or if you have cats. My cat loves to sleep in my dog's crate. She does not have any issue with that. But certainly depending on the dynamics between the animals in the home, we may want to avoid putting food in there if we think that we're going to have any conflict. But it's just your dog, you can just leave stuff in for them. And then it's all about choice. So we're always going to allow our animal to have a choice during this process, because there is a difference between even when you're little being sent to your room versus going to your room to play by yourself, right? So being forced into a situation is never fun. But when dogs realize that they can kind of control the outcome of something, we make a lot of progress, even though it doesn't always feel like it's a little counterintuitive to think that. But usually the more freedom we give our dogs, the quicker the results that we see. A tip that I like to use too is if you've worked with your dog on mat work, or that's a skill you're working on, that can really translate well to the crate, because we can put the mat in the crate and ask to go place on the mat. So this is just an example of me doing some mat work with one of the dogs at the shelter I used to work at. Go lay down. I reinforce him for laying on the mat, and then I reinforce him for staying there. This is Paco. He's very lovely, very smart. So the first game after I kind of get all the basics down that I'm going to work on with the dog is in and out. So at this point, I have determined whether or not my dog is comfortable going into the crate and kind of built that behavior up slowly if they're a little unsure. So in and out is a great one to do. Basically, you toss a treat into the crate as you give your cue. So your cue could be anything that kind of, as it's something that you ask your dog to do, right? So if you say sit, that's a cue for your dog to put their bottom on the ground. Then we mark with our yes or our click, and we feed them a treat. So we can toss a treat in as we give our cue, which could be kennel up or go to your crate, go to bed, and the dog goes in. And then we can toss another treat out of the crate and give a release cue. And a release cue is a cue that lets our dog know that they can come out of the crate and we're all done with this. So I do like to have that for dogs, because then as we build some duration and building the length of time they can stay in the crate, then we can use this as an easy way to say, all right, all done, let's get out and take a break for a second. So some people will use okay or all done, as a nice release cue. So those can work. And we kind of naturally, I think, do that with our dogs a lot of times when we're asking them to sit or stay, is we'll give a cue like that to release. So you can toss the treat out as giving that cue. And then you can begin to mark and reward very quickly while your dog is in the crate. So we start with step 1. We're going to do that a bunch of times, right? I'm always saying like, 10 to 20 times, and then see where your dog's at. And then we can try to add a click when the dog is still in the crate. So, and then we begin to fade out the food lurk. So instead of having to toss the food into the crate while giving the cue, we can just say the words, go to your crate, and they go in, and then we mark. So you're going to see kind of the end of this sequence and what it looks like. This is another JW trainer, Teresa Villatoro, and her dog Cielo. We're very kind in making these videos for me. This is going to be Teresa asking her to go into the crate, clicking for going in, and then clicking quite a few times in a row and feeding to build a little bit of duration, and then releasing her from the crate. And you can see how excited she is.
Great. Okay.
So her release cue is okay, which you might have heard. I know that's a little quiet. So a few things I want you to notice. One, this dog's body language. If your dog looks like this when you're crate training, you're doing it right. They're like all happy and waggy. That is lovely. We love to see that as trainers. Another is how quickly Teresa was marking. So how quick she was clicking the behavior. As soon as Cielo went into the crate, she clicked and fed, and then didn't waste another second, clicked and fed, clicked and fed, clicked and fed, and then said, okay, let's go out. So that's kind of the end of this, what it should look like towards the end of it. But at first you can just go tossing a treat in, tossing a treat out, and kind of learning those cues for them. A game we can play is like an anticipation game, or like what's in the crate. We can get our dogs excited about something we put in the crate so that they really want to get inside to get it. Again, we want our dogs to already have been comfortable walking into the crate to get food. So there are 2 ways you can do this. You can show your dog something yummy, a Kong, you can put a snuffle mat in there, which is just like a little bit of fabric that's kind of long fabric that you can hide treats in, or crumple up a blanket and put treats in it, a chew, or anything that your dog really likes, and let them see you put it in the crate. Your dog is outside of the crate and you close the door, and then let them go for it. Let them try to get at that thing and sniff and paw and maybe like wiggle about trying to get that. And then you can open the door for them. So it kind of creates this like, oh my gosh, I really want to get inside that crate. And we keep the door open if they want to enjoy their bone or their chew in there. Another way that I've done this with my dog is because she already has a really nice wait cue. I'll ask her to wait while she watches me load up the crate. We had to refresh her to the crate when I was doing a week-long training where she would need to be crated in a training group. So she was crated as a puppy in her previous home. We had never crated her, so I wanted to just kind of start all over again. And she picked it up really fast because it was something she had a good association with. So you'll see here in this video, I give her a release cue. I say, find it, which is her cue to go and sniff for food. And she's really excited to enter the crate for that. And you don't need a fancy snuffle mat. This is just treats kind of thrown all about the blanket. This is kind of the beginning, so she doesn't go right in. She's still kind of more comfortable being half in, which is totally fine.
Good girl. Find it.
So I really like this game. I think it's easy to do and a fun way to get our dogs really excited about the crate.
Find it.
So building duration, this is a big one. So duration is just how long our dog can stay in the crate comfortably. So we want to build our duration so that we can leave our dog in the crate and they feel nice and safe and happy. So this is a slower process. We want to slowly increase the time between when we're marking our behavior. So similar to that first video we saw of Teresa, she's marking very quickly, right? Because it's a new behavior that our dog is learning, and the faster we mark and the more we mark, the more information we're giving them. We're saying, yes, in the crate is exactly what we want, and I'm going to show you over and over again. Perfect. Once our dog starts to establish that, oh, okay, being in this crate is what's getting me treats, we can then begin to increase the amount of time between marking. I like to say half a second to a whole second intervals that we go up by at first. And what you'll find is once you start to build duration, it can start to go up pretty quickly. So this is a great video of Cielo working on some duration in the crate. One thing to remember, if you've got your dog up to 20 seconds in the crate, fantastic. But we do want to vary the amount of time that we're asking for during a training session. So if my dog can do 20 seconds, I know that they can wait that long. So maybe I'll ask for 20 and then I'll ask for 10 and then I'll ask for 15 and then I'll ask for 2, just to kind of keep, so we're not always trying to lengthen the amount of time. It can kind of help keep them engaged, and we can then release them out of the crate, go back in, and take a little break. So you can also begin to lure or cue like a sitter down in the crate once your dog is comfortable and kind of understands that like just being in the crate is where the good stuff happens. Or you might find that your dog just starts to do it automatically. And one thing that we'll talk about and I want you to really pay attention to is Teresa's treat placement. So she starts by feeding the dog right at the door of the crate, and then she moves so that she's dropping treats more inside the crate. So in training, we always say we mark for the behavior we like and we feed for the position we want our dog to be in. And so if that's true, then we want to feed our dogs in the crate so that we encourage, that's the place the food's always going to be. So don't bother trying to come to me and get that food. So I like to say between the front paws, especially if they're sitting or laying down, tossing right between the front paws is a great way to encourage that kind of positioning in the crate. So she starts out front. You'll notice less time between or more time between the clicks. And I'm going to play back a part of this. So what I want you guys to start seeing is where her head is positioned for Cielo. It starts way out here. She's coming out of the crate to take the treats. And then as soon as Teresa changes her treat placement, which is perfect timing for her, right? She's like, okay, you've got the picture. We're feeding regularly in the crate. Now I can drop it in a little further. We start to see Cielo's head actually move more into the crate, and she starts to stay in that position because she's like, this is where the food's going to come. So at the very end, we see her kind of wait and pause and look up to Teresa, like, are you going to drop the food in here, right where you've been dropping it? And that's kind of what we're looking for. So if you start to see that behavior from your dog, that's how I know that things are going well, and I can start to increase maybe the durations a little bit more. So let's watch that part just quick again, because it's beautiful. Sniffing. Head is more into the crate. And at that point, she doesn't even bother going to the front because she knows she's going to be fed right there. And then Teresa releases her. Beautiful training. Closing the door. So this is a big one. So depending on your dog, some dogs are more sensitive to closing doors. I do have a client right now where just like even us touching the door, she'll get up and leave the crate. It's just a little bit concerning for her, and that's okay. So typically we say that while your dog is in the crate, maybe we've had them go into a down, or they're in a sit, or they've offered that behavior, then I might just touch the door, click, mark, and feed. If your dog is really stressed, so the dog that I've been working with, where she leaves the crate, then maybe we'll just practice touching the crate door with her outside of the crate and letting her watch, right? So we can modify this. It's never like a hard and fast rule that the dog has to be in the crate if they're not comfortable with it. So typically though, we can start to touch the door and then slowly start to begin to move the door a little bit. I say like ½ an inch or whole inch by inch. So going slow and steady is always better than going too fast. So we can then move the door an inch, click, treat, and move the door back to fully opened, right? So we're saying to our dog, just because the door is closing a little bit doesn't mean that you have to stay in there, the door will open. And then we can continue until we can completely shut that door, right? And then build some duration similar to the last video, but with the door closed. So this is a nice one of Teresa shutting the door completely and building some duration with the door this way. Great. She offers a sit. Okay. Nice. So we'll notice again from Cielo, her head kind of starts to direct towards the place that we can tell Teresa often feeds her when she's in the crate. And she starts to offer a sit. So this is a nice one too, because if you're feeding from the top of the crate, it does kind of encourage our dogs to sit because they're like looking up for the treat. And then we can drop between the paws. So keeping a good eye on body language here, Cielo does like a nice little pause at some point, like, are you gonna give me the treat? That's what we wanna see. So like we talked about before. So if you start touching the door and moving it an inch and your dog is like, all right, give me the treat, we know we can then start to bump up the door a little bit more. And if you go too fast and your dog is like, oh, no, I don't like that, and they try to leave the crate, that's okay. Let them and chalk it up to maybe I pushed a little too fast. The nice thing about this kind of training is it's really easy to go back a step if we need to, refine that a little bit more, and then try again. So prolonging crate time is, our end result. We want our dog to be able to stay in the crate longer than just 20 seconds. So we want to start to add distance a little bit. And so the way we want to do that is actually to relax our duration criteria. So we relax the amount of time our dog stays in the crate while we incorporate movement, because what we eventually want from our dogs is we shut the door and we walk away from them. We want them to be comfortable with us actually leaving them. So we can start slowly by just even like rocking back on our feet. We're taking a side step, right? Marking and feeding our dog. And then if you start to take a few steps away, you mark as you're away from your dog and you walk back to feed them, right? So they hear that click and they know, oh, mom's coming back to feed me. This can be done with the door open or closed. So it's nice, you can kind of work this in as you train for other things. So that's what's nice about crate training is you can work on kind of the duration of time the dog is in the crate, but also moving at a distance. You can work on those things in separate sessions. You don't have to necessarily do them linear. And avoid cueing your dog to wait or stay. So the whole point of the crate behavior is that it's one big behavior of us asking our dog to go in, our dog settling, we shut the door and we walk away and our dog settles. If we're giving them a wait or a stay cue, we're saying, I will come and ask you to get out of the crate, right? I will ask you, okay, it's time to go, which is not the purpose of the crate. We do give a release cue at the end when we come back, but we don't want our dog to be doing this behavior. It should just be the act of settling in the crate, right? And then another great game to help prolong crate time and duration to the door closed is TV time or errand running. So with your dog in the crate, settle down near them, put on a TV show, open up a book, and just start to drop treats into the crate every few seconds, and then slowly increase the amount of time between treats. You can repeat this game when you're doing chores. So this is a great one for also adding in some distance, right? Like mom goes and does the dishes, comes back and gives you a treat. Or when you're working from home, have your crate near you and you can kind of occasionally toss food in. So this is a really great way that once your dog starts to get the concept of like the door is closed, I lay down, we can then prolong the crate time a little bit more. Putting it all together. So as we talked about, meeting your dog's physical, mental, and social needs before crating is going to set them up to be ready for a nap, ready to settle and relax. Schedules really, really help. So working around times where you notice your dog is normally getting sleepy. I have a client right now who, they have their whole schedule. They go for a walk, they go into the crate, the dog gets their Kong, they put on some noise machine, and those things do really help dogs to start to go, okay, it's time for bed. Just like for us, we have our nightly routine. Plan your puppy nap times accordingly. So if you notice that your puppy gets tired every afternoon at 2 p.m., that's when we're going to aim to put them in the crate because they're already naturally getting sleepy that time. And then we're going to do things that promote relaxation. We can leave an enrichment item like a Kong or a snuffle mat in our crate for our dogs. So that can be part of the routine. Sniffing, licking, chewing is very relaxing for dogs. So it kind of puts them in that state of mind. So if you've just played with them and given them lots of love, we say, all right, now it's time to go and settle. And here's something to help you, soothe you and settle you. And then it's more likely to turn into sleep time after that. We can add white noise or classical music. We can cover the crate to make it a more cozy, relaxing spot. And importantly, we want to go at our dog's pace. So we want to look for signs that we're moving too fast. So dogs that paw at the crate, they whine or they're barking. That means that we're moving too fast or we haven't met our dog's needs in other ways before putting them in the crate. Get a camera to see how your dog responds to being left in the crate when you're not in the room. So this could be, you step out into the other room or even you step out of the house. It's really nice to say, okay, my dog looks relaxed, right? Keep sessions really short, 2 to 3 minutes at a time. So you can do like a few 2 to 3 minute sessions, but in between take a break, play, maybe teach a trick or work on some other things and then go back and time yourself. Puppies, even less time. Adolescent dogs, sometimes they don't have the same amount of attention span because everything is so exciting. So really look at your dog's limits and set them up to be successful. Because if we push a training session too long, then our dog gets, we don't get everything. Okay, it didn't go great the last minute. So then I'm going to shorten it because I want it to end really, really well. This is my dog getting just a little bit of snuffle time in her crate. So again, this could be a setup for you. Put a snuffle mat in there. My dog snuffles and then she settles down to go to sleep. And you can see there's a towel over it, so it's covered a little bit for her. She loves a good snuffle mat. If you find that your dog is barking and whining in the crate, I'm not a fan of letting them cry it out, but you can wait a minute or so and see. Especially young puppies, sometimes after they finish that enrichment item, they might cry a little bit and see if they start to settle and soothe, that's okay. But if you have a dog that is continuously barking and whining in the crate, we need to let them out because either they're distressed in the crate or again, we didn't meet their needs in a way that allows them to be successful in the crate. So let's talk a little bit about crate distress. So you can see this dog's body language is lots of stress signs there. We can see how dilated his eyes are. They're reflective. He's taking in a lot of light. His ears are pinned back. He's clearly been destructive in the crate. The crate bars are like completely bent. So this is a dog that is flat out panicking in the crate. I found this randomly online. I would never put a dog in this situation. So one thing to understand when we talk about behavior is the term flooding. So if we go too fast or we ignore our dog's like kind of distress or discomfort signals, we can risk flooding them, which is when we put an animal, this can happen to humans too, in a situation that is overwhelming for them. And eventually they learn that the behavior that they do to try to get out of that situation doesn't work and they give up. So in order for us to understand this, crating is a learned skill. It's not innate behavior. I think we commonly fall into this den animal myth that's been kind of toted around a lot, and dogs should just naturally want to crate. But that's not true. Dogs aren't naturally denning animals. They will, yes, den for motherhood when they're raising puppies. Wolves will do that as well. And they do like to bed down in secure areas, but there's a really big difference between bedding down in a nice little secure area and being shut into a crate with no choice to leave. So if this were an innate behavior, if dogs were truly den animals all the time, we wouldn't need to teach it as much as we need to, right? So remembering that is your dog shouldn't just naturally love the crate. We do have to put a lot of work into that. So flooding can be misinterpreted as calm behavior because your dog eventually gives up and might look calm. They might lay down and they're like this because they realize that everything they're doing has no function. They can't get you to open the door. It causes distress and negative associations because it sensitizes the dog to the trigger, or the crate in this case, instead of desensitizing them. So if we say, let your dog cry it out in the crate, what we're actually doing is saying, let them get so distressed that they just give up, right? And that actually teaches them that the crate is something to worry about or fear, as opposed to saying the crate is awesome, you love it. And things like this, letting the dog cry it out, or like even dogs who travel long distances in crates from rescues, this can result in flooding and sometimes cause aversion to the crate. So it's important to realize that kind of the context that your dog may have ended up in your household. Did you have to fly your puppy from a breeder? You know, did they have to be crated for long periods of time? That might affect how they feel about the crate. I really love this little cartoon about two people who suffered from a mild fear of water. We've all had teachers in our lives who have been teacher B, who was just like, it's fine, jump in, do this thing, you'll be great. And yeah, maybe it worked out, but we probably don't feel good about that thing versus when we have a teacher who lets us go incrementally. He's got a little life vest on and he's walking slowly as he feels safe. He can come out when he needs to versus just being thrown into the deep end. So really thinking about what learning process is more comfortable and which one you'd rather be in, right? I'd much rather have the nice, gentle approach than someone shoving me into a semi-stressful situation and having it become a very stressful situation. So stress signs to look for, early stress signs, kind of more mild, you're gonna see slow, stiff body movement. So remember we kind of talked about like putting just the neck into the crate and like the spine is super straight and they're kind of like really tense, kind of like when we have our shoulders up like this. And we might see some freezing, right? So dogs freeze like it might be brief, a little bit of discomfort. Sometimes they'll raise their paw up when they freeze, if their tail is tucked, and if their head is constantly lowered when they get into the crate. Sometimes we'll see their head lower and like the whites of their eyes because they're looking up. So it means they're a little concerned about what's going on, which is normal, you know, going into the crate, like, oh, there's something up there. We build on that behavior, but if we see that, then we realize maybe we push them a little too far. So pawing at the crate to come out, or a kind of mild vocalization, is meaning they're uncomfortable in the crate. Severe stress signs are going to be the inability to settle. So pacing in the crate, kind of spinning, like heavy, nonstop panting. And when we look at panting, I like to look at the space between the tongue and the teeth, because that's going to show us tension. So if your dog is heavy panting and you can see a lot of space between their teeth and their tongue, there's tension in the face. If it's like that floppy tongue, that's a more relaxed pant. So that's kind of how you can tell the difference. Drooling also sometimes can indicate stress, or destroying objects in the crate, right? Not eating or drinking if you leave them with an enrichment item and you notice that when you come home, they haven't touched it and then start to eat it as soon as you come home, is a sign that your dog could be distressed in the crate. Excessive barking, whining, howling, any kind of growling, snapping, or biting. So a lot of times we see people progress to then, well, I have to push my dog into the crate, right? And then it can result in growling and biting behavior because they really don't want to go in. Digging at the crate or slamming against the door, urinating and defecating in the crate, damaging. So we saw the wires bent on that crate in that other picture. Chewing the bottom base of the crate is a common one. And of course, escaping from the crate. So any self-injurious behaviors, either like from trying to escape the crate or that they're doing to themselves, like excessive biting on their paws or scratching, are all signs that your dog might be distressed in the crate. And the reason for distress, as we kind of discussed, is a lot of it's past learning history. If the crate was used as punishment in a previous home, if they were overcrated consecutively or excessively, if they had to travel and be kept in a crate before they were comfortable being kept in there, dogs from puppy mills or hoarding and neglect situations can sometimes feel distress in the crate because they never had a choice. So separation distress and confinement anxiety can also cause distress. So sometimes we see dogs that have separation distress who do a little better with more freedom in the house because they don't feel trapped. So, and sometimes I've met dogs with separation distress who do better in a crate. So it really depends on your individual dog. And context. So context is really important, and we don't always think about the things in the environment that are affecting our dog in the crate. So for example, my dog does much better in the crate when I put her in and I leave the room, which, as I learned when I was doing some training classes, if she can see me, she's like, hey, please let me out. I don't want to be in here. I want to be with you. If I'm gone, she does not have an issue, right? And some dogs are the opposite. You're home with them and they're comfy in the crate, but as soon as you leave them trapped in the crate, they don't like it. So kind of looking at context in that way as well. But whatever the reason, what I like to ask myself is crating necessary for these dogs? Is it the only way to keep them safe? Is it the only way, to manage them? Usually it's not. And if you're seeing this kind of stuff from the crate, it might just not be something that we work on with them, or we work with a trained professional to really help us get to the root of the issue and kind of see what we can do in the meantime. And just a note, there are things called escape-proof crates, and they are just don't use them, because if your dog is trying to get out of the crate, they're telling us something and we need to respect that. And then we need to work to find the root of that issue instead of just saying, well, at least you can't get out now, you're fine, right? So to keep the crate a safe place, we never want to use the crate as punishment. And so I will say, instead of thinking of it as like a timeout, if your dog needs a break, which happens a lot with puppies and adolescent dogs, they start to get mouthy and overtired, and we want to give them a break. I like to think of it as switching activities, similar to you would a kid. They're running around at a birthday party. Okay, now we're going to go home. And you know what we're going to do when we go home? We're going to read a book, right? We're going to do things that naturally kind of take it down a notch. And so to do that with the dog in a crate, you just say, okay, we're going to switch gears. I'm going to ask you to go in your crate and I'm going to give you something like a Kong or slow feeder that's going to promote relaxation. I'm not going to just remove you from a situation, stick you in the crate and walk away, right? So the crate becomes this, well, let's take a little break. Watch your dog's body language, pay close attention. Do they look comfortable? Never force your dog to go into the crate. And work with a certified dog trainer if needed, if you're struggling or you have questions about crate training. And then alternatives to crating is our last slide. So this is good for dogs that can't be crated due to distress or separation issues, puppies who physically cannot hold their bladders and you need to be gone longer than they can stay in the crate. Management, if you've just recently adopted a dog, so that you can keep them safe while you're working on crate training, or just allowing your dog a larger space if you do end up needing to leave them alone for longer periods of time. So your adult house trained dog, you might just want to be able to give them more space and freedom in the house without completely giving them free roam. So some ways to do this are baby gates and those exercise pens. It's this one, that foldable pen. You can fold it, you can see nicely around a crate and the crate open if you're working on crate training. This is great for puppies. You can put like a potty pad. I love this picture here because you can see the potty area, the water bowls, the open crate, the gate, and then I love how they put cute boot and purse outside, the cute boots and purse outside of the gate so that the dogs don't have access to chew on those things, and giving them lots of things in that area that they can chew. You can see there are toys and chews there. So this is a nice setup, especially for puppies, so that if they do need to potty, and you absolutely can't find someone to take them out during that time, they can go to their potty pad instead of soiling the crate. They have access to water and things like that. And then even a baby gate. So using a gate to section a dog off into a dog-proof room or area of the home. When I first got my dog, she was lovely and she just slept all day. We put a camera on her, but we kept her in our bedroom and we made sure she couldn't get into anything. While we were kind of getting to know her and working on house training. So kind of seeing, are you chewing on stuff you shouldn't be? Are you getting into any trouble? She had stitches from her spay. Are you bothering your stitches? So we could see her, and it also helped us feel a little calmer about leaving her. And then eventually we were like, all right, she's good. And we would let her free roam in the house. So that can be a really nice way to kind of gear up to crate training, or giving your dog a little bit more freedom as they get better about house training and things like that, is using these kinds of tools. So that is everything I have. So I am going to punt it back to Miranda to see if we have any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Kat. That was awesome and a ton of information. Folks, right now, I don't have anything in the chat box, and I know that there are questions out there. So if you have a burning question that you've been waiting to ask, please put it in the chat box now. I think one of the things that, we talked about this before, Kat, with the sort of the name for the presentation was to create or not to create. So I'm going to ask you the question, what is your elevator pitch 30-second blurb on to create or not to create?
I think if you have a dog that is willing and likes to learn about the crate, absolutely, it's a beautiful skill for your dog to have. If it's something that causes them severe distress and we don't need to use it, I think that is perfect. We don't have to. There are alternatives to that. That being said, if you are like, well, my dog panics in the crate and I'm moving across the country, that's when we go dog trainer. Maybe we get some pharmaceutical help, right? We get some medication. How can we reduce stress as much as possible in a necessary situation? So really looking at your own dog and saying, what's going to work best for you?
Awesome. All right, we have a question. My dog spills his water in the crate. Any tricks for giving access to water?
Yes, yeah, that's a common one. I've seen, and I'm gonna let me know how you feel about those. I know that sometimes they make the ones that hang down, kind of like the hamster ones. Sometimes that can be helpful, but I've never used them. Have you ever used them, Miranda?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that we can potentially learn from the small mammal world. So there are the bottles that hang down, and basically when they lick them, the water comes out. So you commonly see them on like rabbit or hamster cages. Some places also have like the smaller bowl that you kind of attach to the side of the crate and screw in, and you can put that slightly raised. So for some dogs, it's a matter of like, I'm playing with my bowl. For some dogs, it's like oh, maybe I need a bigger crate. I can't turn around without stepping in the water bowl. But for some dogs, it's just like, okay, if it's in the corner and it's attached to the wall of the crate, they're less likely to tip it over. So that's one thing that I definitely recommend, as well as sometimes it's just the type of bowl. They're the type that kind of come down this way on the ends, and it has like rubber around the bottom that are a little bit heavier versus something that's really easy to flip. So usually with those, it's just a matter of kind of playing around with the type of bowl that you're using or the type of way that you're getting the water to them, unless it is the toy, in which case those are times where I'm like, okay, can we make the water less fun and can we give them something else that's fun to play with instead, so that we don't have to keep cleaning up the water.
Yeah, and I have a client right now, she has an elevated water bowl for her dog that she'll put in the crate, but she just made sure that the crate is large enough that the dog can stand up and turn around with that there, right? So maybe just expanding in a little bit more to give a little bit more space. That I thought that was a really nice workaround, having to place it on the floor and having her spill it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see folks pretty frequently that don't end up sizing up crates when their dog grows, because they're still thinking of the crate as like, I'm using this to prevent my dog from going potty. And I'm like, when they're puppies, that's an incredibly powerful tool. But once your dog is an adult, there's no harm in having them have a bigger crate as long as it fits in your space. If anything, I'd rather have them have more space. Some dogs may decide they don't like their crate because it's just a little too small. So always helpful to kind of go the size up if you can manage it within your space.
And definitely, like, I look at my dog, so she's quite tall. So I wanted to make sure she had the height on it, but also she is a spreader when she sleeps. She wants to be like this. And my thing is, if I want her to be comfortable, I want her to be able to get in the positions I know she likes to sleep in. She doesn't like to curl up tight. So it's a great thing to have a larger crate in those kinds of cases too.
Yeah, or even attaching an X pen. So some people will have their crate and then kind of an X pen around it, so their dog is still contained, but they're not necessarily in the crate. So they may be able to come out of it, but they're still kind of in their hidey space. So lots of ways to use it. Thank you so much for that. As someone who did a lot of rescue work right after Hurricane Harvey, absolutely I'd love for every dog to be willing to go in a crate, even if they're not going to use it, except in a blue moon. It's a really nice thing to have just for safety. So I'm so glad we were able to have you out today. Thank you all so much for coming. Quick reminders. Again, this will be recorded and put online. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. So if you like what you heard today, if you've attended webinars of ours, please consider making a donation. You can also get some really sweet merch. You can buy some t-shirts that say dog training is for everyone. And again, that allows us to help continuing to support people who maybe don't have the financial means to afford typical training resources. So stay tuned. Our next webinar coming up is about resource guarding and cats and dogs. So we've got some fun stuff coming up there, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much again, Kat. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.